Hello, welcome to another episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. Today is Saturday, February 3rd. It is the week before the Super Bowl, Super Bowl 58. The matchup is set. It is the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers in Las Vegas. For now, though, this is a bye week. You've got the Pro Bowl on tomorrow. You've got the Senior Bowl today. You had a full week of Senior Bowl stuff going on, which we'll get to here a little bit later on. But today will be a little bit of a season recap video. I guess if that's the way you want to label it, it'll be a season recap, taking a dive into some of our biggest and most favorite games of the year. We'll also predict who we think should and will win the awards, offense and defensive rookie of the year. Of course, the biggest one being the MVP. We'll also take a look at offensive defensive player of the year, FedEx Air and Ground player of the year. So a couple of different awards we'll take a look at, along with comeback player of the year. And should there be a most improved player of the year in the near future? And of course, we'll get to some Senior Bowl stuff later on. As always, joining me is DiMari Cooley. DiMari, how's it going, man?
I'm good. Like you said, last week of football coming up next week. We're in
Yep.
our last 2 weeks all in total. So I'm kind of just excited to go back and recap what we've seen this season. Some guys that kind of stood out, a few games that kind of caught our eyes. So it's going to be a great show.
Yep, looking forward to it. It's a little bit of a lull right now in between the Super Bowl, but of course, obviously, that's why you want to enjoy those championship and divisional rounds, because now we have to wait 2 weeks for one game. But yeah, today, as you mentioned, you hit the nail on the head. We'll be kind of just discussing and recapping what took place in the 2023 season. I think we can both agree, many people agree, it was a crazy 2023 year. There was a lot of unexpected, a lot of backup quarterbacks. So before we get into each of our games, how would you sum up? Of course, Super Bowl 58 still got to happen, and hopefully that's a good game, and hopefully it's a classic. But before that happens, how would you sum up the playoffs, the regular season, and 2023 as a whole before the full off season really begins?
Yeah, I think it was one of the better years. And, like you said, a lot of backup quarterbacks. And we've
Yeah.
seen some backup quarterbacks kind of step in and do a great job. And, Gardner Minshew, for example, and you lead your team a game away from the playoffs.
Yep.
And then you got some guys like, sorry, but Zach Wilson that
Yeah.
steps in and, everything for the team kind of goes down the drain. But, it's a pretty good year. We had some surprising teams. I like what I saw from Houston. I like what I saw from Tampa, and a good type of surprise. And then you got some others like the Eagles and also Dallas, who kind of bad surprises. Their season didn't end how it should have. So otherwise, I think the season was great, and I feel like it's going to be a great season next year with a lot of the starting quarterbacks coming back and kind of seeing what a lot of teams have and what they're going to add on. So yeah, the 2024 season is going to be quite exciting. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, definitely. I think, this year was definitely one of the more, it was a lot of fun. It was one of the more, from a Jet fan perspective, it was the most torturing season of them all, just because of the expectations that we went into the year with and ended with. From that perspective, it was probably the worst season I've ever witnessed as a Jet fan. But just from an NFL fan perspective, it was a lot of fun. And like you said, you had a lot of these surprising teams. I think there was much more parity around the NFL this year, although the Super Bowl is two teams that many expected to get here. I mean, it's, while the Chiefs were still underrated, they have Patrick Mahomes. As long as he's there and healthy, they're going to be a contender every single season. And of course, the Niners being the one seed, a lot of people at the beginning of the year thought they were going to go all the way. But even though the Super Bowl is, I guess if you want to call it expected, boring, same type of teams that just met back in 2019, they're meeting again. The playoffs were a lot different. You had the Lions get to the NFC title game. When's the last time you could say that? It's been hundreds of years. That's exaggeration, but it feels like that. You even had, again, you mentioned teams like the Texans. They won a playoff round. They've gone through some serious struggles recently to get to the playoffs, win a game, and even push Baltimore to the second half of that game where it was a tie game. They made it a game. It wasn't, it turned out to be a tough one for them, but they made it close. You had teams like Tampa. Everybody thought they were going to explode this season, be a dysfunctional dumpster fire with Todd Bowles and Baker Mayfield. Sure enough, they go on, win a playoff game, and ended up losing in the divisional round. And then, of course, like you said, you had some disappointments for Philly where they lose in the wild card round. Same thing with Dallas after a very successful regular season. And even some teams like Green Bay as well, who kind of flew under the radar, struggling early on, went on the road, won a playoff game, and they've set themselves up. So I thought there was a lot more parity this year. I thought you saw, even the Browns, Steelers found a way to get in, which they always do. But I thought from that perspective, I thought there was a lot of new teams, a lot of fresh faces. Jared Goff back in the mix, CJ Stroud, rookie, Flacco coming out of the middle of nowhere and making an impact and getting Cleveland to the playoffs, winning the division for, or clinching a home playoff game clinching a playoff game for the first time at home in a while when they beat the Jets. So a lot of good things happened this year, but we'll get into the top 3 games of the year. So I guess we can kind of go back and forth here. You can give one, I'll give one, and invite, that way here. So you could start. What was your top game? Give me one, I'll give one, and then we'll go back and forth.
Well, I'm going to throw in an honorable mention if you want to throw one of those in there.
Okay.
And watching a lot of NFL games as a fan, you want to watch good games, you want to see good games. But my honorable mention is going to be Week 1 Jets Bills. I mean, there's unless your team is playing, there's not a lot of plays that kind of make you stand up off the couch at 12 o'clock in the morning like that game. But that Xavier Gibson punt return, that was special to start the year off. So that's going to be my honorable mention. I mean, Rodgers goes down, and both offenses kind of just looked like they didn't deserve to be on the field. And for Gibson, who, again, I don't know if you watched Hard Knocks when they covered the Jets, for a guy who was undrafted and fighting for a roster spot kind of all year, and like they saw the potential in him, and he ends up making the roster. And, he really – his welcome to the league moment was that punt return in Week 1 to win the game. That was special. That kicked off the year just the way we needed it to.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. That was actually one of my games as well. I'll put that, I guess, if you want to say number 1 on my list, just maybe, I guess, biased because I'm obviously a Jet fan. But yeah, I was obviously at the game that night. When Rodgers went down, you could hear a pin drop in that place. And, the defense began to get some stops. Zach Wilson was kind of game managing, doing just enough. Garrett Wilson made that crazy catch in the end zone. But yeah, the Xavier Gibson's catch or punt return is always something I'll remember. That stadium erupted. It was crazy being there. Craziest environment I've ever been in for a sports environment, jumping up and down. And I knew walking out of that stadium that we had to enjoy that win because we weren't going to get many more. And sure enough, that was the case. We were 1-0, won a division game, beat the Bills. And especially too, like you said, starting the season on a high note, like that was first Monday night game, Aaron Rodgers, Josh Allen. And even though Aaron Rodgers goes down, I still feel like that game in a way like lived up to the hype with that crazy ending. Because when Aaron Rodgers went down, you're thinking to yourself, man, this is going to be a blowout. This game's going to be terrible. I spent $130 on seats to go watch Zach Wilson play football. Like, this is terrible. And then sure enough, it obviously ended in an undrafted free agent getting an opportunity to make the team out of camp and then to go in there and win a game like that on a night that was so emotionally upsetting. But the emotional highs and lows during that game was crazy. And even Jordan Whitehead too had 3 interceptions. I think after that game, if you were a Bills fan, the Josh Allen turmoil and turnover talk really blew up because he had 4 turnovers in that game. One of those being super costly in the fourth quarter, I believe it was, with the fumble. So that was a tough one for Bills fans, but a very fun night for Jets fans. And you walked out of that building happy, but then you got up that Tuesday morning, you kind of recognized, our season's over. We got to wait till next year because Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles on the fourth play. So yeah, I agree with you. Definitely Jets, one of mine as well. So what's your other game? Where you're second or of 3?
The third one for me on this list is going to be Dolphins and Chargers. After I watched that game kind of go back and forth, I just knew this was like we might be looking at the AFC Championship game right here. How those two teams look. I mean, offensive explosion. Herbert looked great. Tua looked great. Obviously, Tyreek Hill is going to be Tyreek Hill. That's the best game Austin Eckler had this whole entire year. And I was just so excited watching that game. I love offense. I'm more of an offensive guy. So kind of seeing them go back and forth, like I said, I'm like, here's 2 teams, both good enough to win a Super Bowl, offensive power. Kellen Moore living up to the hype. Justin Herbert finally living up to the hype. And we see how both of their season ended. So that game was obviously a fluke, but that's going to be week 3.
Yeah.
That's going to be number 3 for me on my top 3 games.
Yeah, no doubt. And Tyreek Hill too. He had 215 or 200 plus yards in that game. That was definitely exciting. And like you said, I think a lot of people watching that game thought, yeah, this could be an AFC championship game. But come to find out, both teams completely blow up late in the year. Chargers obviously end up getting blown out against the Raiders later in the year, fired their coach, and now got Harbaugh now. But I will say this, like, if you're a Chargers fan, I will say this type of game, if you want to give yourself some optimism, I know it's all the way back in week 1, but this is a type of game where if they have a defense and Harbaugh gets the most out of Justin Herbert, this is a type of game that the Chargers could win for a very long time if they get things going in the right direction. And of course, Miami just went off. Tua looked like a Hall of Famer in this game. It was like MVP Tua, and then of course the Dolphins flop like they always do late in the year. But yeah, this was definitely a fun one, and I thought week 1 as a whole just had a lot of really good games. You had the Jet game, you got this game. Definitely was the end of the season started with a lot of fireworks, no doubt. So that is your number 3. I kind of jumped to number 1 with the Jets Bills, so I'll jump back here to number 3. I've also kind of got an honorable mention as well, which I could discuss here a little bit later on. I'll go number 3 here. I'll go with the Buccaneers Texans, where the Texans won 39-37 in week 9. Yeah, this game was awesome. And for CJ Stroud, I think this was probably, if you didn't believe in CJ Stroud yet, this was probably the game where you knew that CJ Stroud was the guy. Like, if you didn't think he was the guy yet in Houston, you knew it after this game. Threw for 5 touchdowns, 470 yards. Just a crazy game. Baker Mayfield himself had a really solid game, threw for 260 plus 2 touchdowns. I mean, the Texans had 3 receivers in this game over 100 yards. 4 different guys catch touchdown passes. If you liked offense, this was the game for you. And it felt like this game, I wouldn't say saved the season for the Texans, but if you want to say that, it'd probably be a proper description, because prior to this, the week before, they lost to Carolina and Bryce Young, one of Carolina's 2 wins this year, and they fell to 3-4. This game sparked a 3-game win streak, got to 6-4. Of course, they ended up winning 10 games, making the postseason, but it felt like if they didn't have this offensive outburst, we might have a completely different view on the Texans 2023 season. But this was a game that was awesome. And for Tampa's sake, you walked out of this game very disappointed in the defense, but Baker Mayfield continued his strong play. So this was definitely like a rookie record for Stroud, 470 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, all that great stuff. This was like, yeah, this guy's legit. What were your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I absolutely agree that was his game where kind of Texas fans were like, okay, we found our guy. Because, I mean, even myself, watching that game and how it kind of ended, I'm like, Jacksonville might be in trouble. Like, they're going to have their hands full. And because they were leading the division at the time. But you're like, man, Jacksonville might be in some trouble. Like, when these two play, now looking at Stroud, and I feel like we say this every week with him and just that team, with DeMeco Ryans about to go into year 2 of a head coach experience, and then you get Tank Dell back. And then they're just going to continue to add on in the draft, and they might be aggressive in free agency. I mean, I think that could be like their division to win for a while. But and along with the Tampa aspect of it, Tampa did lose that game. That's a disappointing way to lose that game. But Tampa fans, like after that game, I kind of felt that answer, Baker Mayfield could be the guy, which he showed he is the guy. I hope they go ahead and give him a contract, another contract this offseason. He deserves it. Bring your pieces back, run it back next year. But I absolutely agree that was one of the best games this year.
Yeah, it was by far just crazy. And that touchdown pass to Tank Dell with 6 seconds left, like even that, just from that perspective as well, as a Texan fan, you're thinking, yeah, this is going to be the 1-2 combo this franchise is going to have for a very long time. So this was awesome. What was your other game on your list, number 2?
Number 2 for me was watching Gardner Minshew and I believe P.J. Walker battle it out in Indianapolis when Deshaun Watson got hurt. I know that game came down to the wire, came down to like a bad, missed pass interference call in the back.
Penalties, yep.
But yeah, that one was a good one. I mean, I didn't think the Browns and Colts were going to put up, numbers like that in a game like that. Those are kind of one of those games you see on the slate and you're just like, I might take a nap during this. I might watch a few of it. I might clean the house. But no, that was a great game, and that was a game where I think Browns fans probably kind of got concerned is like, Deshaun Watson absolutely fleeced us because
Yeah.
they looked so much better without him there. And I mean, also remember you have no Nick Chubb in that game, so Jerome Ford steps up and he has like that 169-yard touchdown run and he disappears for the rest of the game. I think that was Josh Downs' welcome to the NFL moment with the Colts.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was high scoring. Again, I love offense. So kind of seeing those two, that's a matchup. I think I'd rather see that matchup, PJ Walker and Gardner Minshew over Anthony Richardson, Deshaun Watson any day. That's just me, but that's gonna be number 2 for me on my list.
Yeah, this game was crazy, and it's unfortunate that it came down to the missed calls in the end zone from a Colts perspective. And who knows, like looking back on it, the Colts win this game, they're in the playoffs, and the Texans might not be, or however it ends up playing out. If they, it might not have come down to that final game of the regular season in week 18 for them. So tough one for the Colts. But yeah, from a Browns perspective, you were thinking to yourself, man, what are we going to do? And then who knew in came Flacco saving the day, Hall of Fame, Joe Flacco, Super Bowl winning quarterback right there. Probably, I don't know if he'll be in the Hall of Fame. That's a different discussion, different day. But who knew their quarterback that was going to play a playoff game for them was sitting on the couch, maybe watching this game and seeing
Yeah.
the dysfunction they had at quarterback. But yeah, this was a fun one for sure. And on paper, if you saw if the three quarterbacks that played in this game were Gardner Minshew, PJ Walker, and Deshaun Watson, remove the threes from the score, you're thinking this is going to be a 9-8 final. That's probably what
Absolutely
you're
low
thinking. So
scoring.
yeah, no doubt. And yeah, this was a fun one. It's interesting. There was a couple of these games that were way up there, like 39-37. Obviously the Texans Tampa game, 39-38. Just a lot of these 3-2, 1 point games that came down to the wire, came down to red zone plays, came down to literally, fourth downs and all that stuff. So a lot of really nail biting moments, but definitely a good choice there. So I'll go here, number 2 on my list. Um, Obviously Jets was number 1, Bucks Texans was 3. I'll go number 2, Bills Eagles week 12. This was a fun one. Overtime winner. Bills ended up walking out of here with a loss. Now, this is an interesting game when you look back on it because this game was really the last win for Philly that was like impressive. Because after this game, their season completely fell apart. They won this game 37-34, and then they lost 5 of their next 6. They lost 3 straight to San Francisco, Dallas, Seattle. They beat the Giants, and then they lost to Arizona and the Giants, and then it obviously lost to Tampa. So looking back on it, this win didn't mean a whole lot for Philly. It was actually the start of their downfall. And I think in this game, even though Philly won it, you saw the issues on defense. You saw the way Josh Allen played. But again, another game where if you're a fan of offense, this was the game for you. And then from a Bills perspective, they lose this game. They fall to 6-6. And you looked at their schedule and you saw Kansas City on the road and then Dallas. After that, you're thinking this team's easily going to be 6-8. And then they still had Miami. This team might lose 10, 11 games this year. After you walk away from that game with that thought, they lost 3 of 4 then. Then they had a bye week, and then they won 5 straight. So in a way, the loser of this game actually benefited more than the winner when you look at it, back again,
Yeah.
because the Eagles won the game. Their season fell apart. Bills lose. They ended up regrouping at the bye, firing Dorsey, bringing in Brady and all that stuff, and turning their season around. But this was a fun one. You go back overtime. Bills had the opportunity. Gabe Davis was wide open. Josh Allen missed him. Could have hit him there. Could have had him. So many moments there for Buffalo. You had a couple rough moments where, some of the penalties that, there was a missed horse collar at times, but Allen played out of his mind in this game. 339 yards. Hurts also had a big day. Devontae Smith had a big day. There was a lot of really big performers. Gabe Davis had over 100 yards. I believe this was his he had a couple 100 yards games. I think this was one of 3 he had. But this was a fun one in poor weather. Eagles in their throwbacks came away with a win, but little did we know that would pretty much be the end of it. What were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I fell to my knees when
Yeah.
Josh Allen missed Gabe Davis on that
Yeah.
post. I'm the biggest Eagle hater that or we
Mm-hmm.
might be tied for it, but I was praying for the downfall so hard, and they ended up pulling that one out, and I think that took them to 10-1, if I'm correct. when I seen them go out to 10-1, us and them were still fighting for a divisional
Yep.
spot. Well, to win the division, I just knew it was over. I looked at the rest of that schedule. It was like it's over.
Mhm.
You go win this one, and then they end up beating Kansas City, and they're beating these teams. They beat Miami, and you're just like, it's just not meant to me. But like you said, that was the start of something great. They collapsed 5 out of 6. It should have been 6 out of 6, but um, Tyrod Taylor kind of had a overthrow in that game. Isaiah Simmons kind of missed a pick six on a 3rd and 20. Few things happened in that game where the Eagles kind of scraped it out, but it all worked out in the end how it's supposed to be. But that was another fun one too. Besides seeing Philly pull that one out, but thank you to Jake Elliott that week. I won my fantasy by two
Yeah.
points due to his field goal kicking. So that's a bright side from that game.
It was like a win-win all around because then
Yeah.
the Eagles ended up just collapsing afterwards. So
Yep.
it was pretty
Yeah.
good. It was good weekend for you. But yeah. So what was your best game or number one of the year?
Yeah. Number one is gonna be biased, but watching Seattle come out in the throwbacks, Dallas
Yeah.
beats them 41-35. I mean, DK Metcalf had his like Randy Moss game. He was insane that game. Then Dak, I don't know. That's the best I think I've ever seen Dak play. It was a point in that game. I think it was like a third down scramble. Him and I believe Tariq Woolen kind of, went helmet or shoulder to shoulder. Dak kind of got up and kind of flexed on him. I said that's the Dak I like to see. Just that one was fun. Just offense. It came down to the wire. Geno Smith looked amazing. Like that game there, I'm like, if Dallas sees Seattle in the playoffs, I'm scared. I do not want to play them. I was hoping they did
Mhm.
not end up with that like 5 through 7 seed because we would have lost. I think Seattle would have beat us second time around. But number one for me, that game was I think the best Dallas played all year. The best
Mhm.
Dak played all year. Like that is stamped MVP for Dak. I don't know what game should have, but just seeing them be able to come out, and I believe that was a game after Thanksgiving. I could be wrong, but you know, seeing them come out and pull that one out against a very good opponent, that was number one for me. That made my night.
Yeah, I agree. That was actually one of my honorable mentions. 41-35 is crazy. And then yeah, we talked about this when this was stretch of games was happening, but like you said, this was after Thanksgiving. But this was during that stretch where they had 3 games in 12 days, I believe it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which was crazy. And they found a way to come out on top in all 3 of those games, beating Carolina, Washington, and of course in this one, Seattle. Yeah, this one was crazy. Anytime you put up 40 points, I mean, Dak obviously 3 big touchdowns, CeeDee Lamb with a big day. This was truly like a battle of just 2 great receivers. DK Metcalf had, you could make the case probably his best game of the season. And then, of course, CeeDee Lamb with a huge game where he had 116 catches or 116 yards. 116 catches would be wild.
That's wild.
Yeah, 116 yards on 12 catches for a touchdown. But yeah, this was a fun one. And I think too, just again, like this was, as we talked about, 3 games in 12 days. This was on the back end of that stretch to find a way and go out there and have your offense still find success like that. And of course, too, there was that stretch where I think they were down at one point. What was it, like 35, 27, and they were able to score
Yeah, was able to manage a little
14
comeback
unanswered.
there.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. They played really well. This was definitely one of my honorable mentions. So good choice there. One of my other honorable mentions, I'll go here. Not that this is a very good game, but I mean, from a defensive perspective, what were the Broncos doing? 70-20 Dolphins over the Broncos. Uh week number 3. This was a wild one.
Was that
Uh
the Tyreek Hill celebrate in the stands game? I think
yeah, I
that was
believe so.
that one.
Yeah.
That was
So
wild.
he had 157 yards. Tyreek Hill had. Let's look at some of the numbers here. So Dolphins had 726 total yards. Total yards. Jeez, how did Vance Joseph had a job after this game? I don't know how, but he did. And the Broncos actually kind of got better. And it was interesting because the Dolphins won this game, and then they ended up going on the road and getting crushed against Buffalo. And that's when I think everybody knew, yeah, the Dolphins are the same old Dolphins every year. They'll beat all the bad teams, lose to the good teams, and they're a wild card exit. But 70-20 is just crazy.
Yeah, I
Uh,
felt like I was watching. I don't know, like Ohio State and
Yeah.
I
Northwestern
don't
Tech.
know, something like that. The Citadel,
The
that game
Citadel,
was
yeah.
insane. I remember I was at work and I got a notification. It was so misleading, and it was like tune into the Dolphins and Broncos game now. They scored like 56 combined points, but the Dolphins have 42 of them, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
what am I watching? But that was a fun one. I remember I was this thing they were saying they Mike McDaniel started pulling guys from the stands and just calling plays for them. And I
Yeah.
think it was a Mike McDaniel lookalike in the stands during that game. Play sheet, headset. It was like
Hmm.
he's in the stands calling plays for just random guys. That that was a funny one for the Dolphins and kind of see how their season ended. But yeah, that was a good one as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Actually, in this game, Marvin Mims Jr. in the fourth quarter had a 99-yard kickoff return, which cut the lead to 43. So
The
that was big.
the Chris Paul three
Yeah,
that
the
cut the lead to 42.
42. Yeah, that's what it was like. Yeah. Yeah, big kickoff return. Marvin Mims Jr. kickoff return to cut the lead to 43 with 8 minutes left. But yeah, this game was over before it started. Denver didn't even show up. They scored in 3 plays, 75 yards on the first drive. Yeah, Denver was nowhere to be found. Will Lutz then hit a big field goal to end the half to cut the lead to, what was it, 22 at that point. Yeah, this was a disaster if you're Denver, but a good one for Miami. And then come to find out next week they were on the opposite end of a blowout in Buffalo, which is typical Miami fashion. So,
That's Miami for you.
yep. So those are the 3 top games of the year, along with some honorable mentions as well. So now we can move on here to awards. I guess we could start save best for last with the MVP. We'll start here with Offensive Player of the Year. The nominees are Tyreek Hill, Lamar, CeeDee Lamb, CMC, Dak. Out of this list, who do you think should win and who do you think will win?
I think who will win and who should win is both Tyreek Hill. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he was on pace for some crazy numbers, and he ended up getting injured. Missed the game. And a lot of games
Yep.
he just wasn't 100%. But that record would have been blown out of the water if he would have stayed healthy. So I'm going to take Tyreek Hill for those two right there.
Yeah, I agree as well. I'm going to take Tyreek Hill. You mentioned it, almost eclipsed. He was 1 yard short of 1,800 yards, 13 touchdowns. First in the NFL in yards, tied for second in receptions, tied for first in touchdowns. He was a monster. So I think he'll win, and I also think he should win it. Big season from him. Moving on here, Defensive Player of the Year. Deron Bland from Dallas, Max Crosby, Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett, and TJ Watt. Who do you think will and should win it?
Whew, that's actually a tough one. I mean, I'm not prepared for that one. I think TJ Watt may end up winning it. You said TJ Watt, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, TJ
I
Watt. Yep.
I think he might end up winning it. I just got this feeling. I don't know, just his impact on the game. You seen a big difference when he kind of wasn't in there
Mm-hmm.
for the Steelers. So I think he will win it. But personally, I think who should win it is Max Crosby. I mean, watching him this year, he was wreaking havoc on teams. I mean, I don't think he gets this year he did, but he doesn't really get the respect that he deserves. I mean, playing in Vegas, which I thought would bring more to his name, considering like that is a bigger market team now, I guess. But
Mm-hmm.
Crosby's a
Yeah.
beast, so I hope he wins it. I think that's who should win it.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with TJ Watt here. I think he will, and I think he should. Um, I just think he led the league in sacks, 19, 4 forced fumbles, tied for 5th. And I think too with TJ Watt was just like when the Steelers when he plays, the Steelers win. When he doesn't, they lose. And I think that
Yeah.
just shows you too how valuable he is to that team. So I'm gonna go Watt here. The guy's had, I think, 98 and a half sacks or something like that in his career. It's crazy what he's done. There's a lot of really good names on this list. Like you mentioned, Crosby, Micah Parsons, of course, had a really good season. And even Myles Garrett in Cleveland, who was a big reason why they were able to still make the playoffs, even with some of the quarterback changes. So I think I'll go with TJ Watt here for both. What were your thoughts on just Deron Bland as a whole? Like, just as a Cowboys fan, what were your thoughts on him this season?
I thought he was good. I thought he
Hmm.
played pretty well. I know that a lot of people. It was the same thing with Trayvon Diggs a few years ago when he led in interceptions. What you go watch a game with Deron Bland and like he'll get a pick six and he has a great game. And like, oh, okay, Deron Bland, like he's great. And then the game against Seattle where DK Metcalf just had a great game, then it's like, oh, this guy sucks. Like he doesn't deserve to be on the field. I
Hmm.
don't think people really understand how hard it is to play cornerback. So to get a interception in the game it's hard. Like it's very hard. But to break the record for pick sixes in a season is absolutely insane. So, I think he gets discredited because he does give up a lot of yards, like if you want to say that. But like I said, it's hard to play cornerback. But once he kind of starts to take that next step, kind of how Trayvon Diggs did, where it was,
Yeah.
I'm not too
Yeah.
worried about the interceptions. Now let me worry more on just not giving up the yards. Just making sure I'm winning my matchup. Once he gets there, which I believe he will next season, I think he's going to remain one of the top names when we mention like the best cornerbacks in the league.
Yeah, becoming more of that like more lockdown type like Diggs,
Yeah,
obviously. Then
consistent, just
yeah,
consistency.
yeah, exactly. That's definitely a good word to use. More consistent rather than more boom bust where you're gonna either
Yeah.
get burnt or get an interception. But yeah, good list of names there for defensive player of the year. Moving on here to offensive rookie of the year. Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, Puka Nakua, Bijan Robinson, and we've already talked about him earlier today, CJ Stroud. Who do you got winning and who do you think will come away with this honor?
There's two that stand out for me that
Hmm.
absolutely have to be one and two, but who I think I might contradict myself here a little bit. I would like to see Puka Nakua win it because I mean he literally came out of nowhere, like
Yeah.
absolutely nowhere. And again, for the fantasy owners, this was a guy who was just on the waiver wire and you just picked him
Mhm.
up because somebody told you to, and then like he completely changed your team for the season. So I think he is well deserving, especially with no Cooper Cup there, to still put up the numbers that he was doing for a Rams team that looked dead, and he kind of brought life back to like Stafford, Sean McVay, that team in a whole. So I think he is deserving of winning it, but you have to give it to Stroud. Stroud's gonna
Mhm.
be the winner. I mean, first year, you're a rookie, first year head coach, wide receiver gets hurt like throughout the year, and a lot of people thought the Texans had a bunch of no names like as their weapons. And I mean, personally, I really wasn't familiar with Nico Collins. Like I knew Dalton Schultz,
Mhm.
obviously,
Yeah.
Singletary. A lot of these guys where you're like, there's no way the Texans win even 6 games, and you go to the second round of the playoffs. So,
Yeah.
CJ Stroud is gonna win it. I wouldn't be mad about him or Nakua, but I think everybody on that list is actually deserving of it though.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with definitely your take on Puka Nakua. Fifth round pick. Nobody thought anything of this guy going into the season compared to, of course, Stroud, who was second quarterback taken off the board and was very good at Ohio State, highly touted coming out of the draft. Um, Expected more out of him than what people expect out of Puka Nakua. But I agree with you here. I'm going to go with Stroud. The guy was a monster, and you're spot on with the takes on the receiving core. I mean, this was probably you can make the case the most least talented team that Stroud will have around him. And I'm sure they'll build up the receiving core, but even Singletary, Dalton Schultz, those guys are good, but that's not Travis Kelce and Christian McCaffrey back
Absolutely.
there for him. It's two veterans that have been around that have been around the league for a little bit. Singletary obviously spent time with Buffalo, now in Houston, of course. Schultz, spending a lot of time in Texas with Dallas, and of course Houston as well. Solid, serviceable, but nothing crazy. But a good veteran to have for a rookie, and then of course Collins. Even Robert Woods, another veteran that they've had. And obviously, Tank Dell was a monster this season, even Noah Brown had some good stretches as well. So a lot of guys really kind of just turned it up with Stroud. But 63.9 completion percentage, 4,108 yards. That was eighth in the NFL, 23 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. That was what's most impressive for me. He didn't turn the ball over much. For a rookie, that's rare. You see a lot of these rookies, they might throw 30 touchdowns, but they're going to throw 13 interceptions because, it's a faster game. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to make dumb throws. They're going to struggle with pressure in their face. And Stroud, that wasn't the case. And for a rookie to go in there, win a playoff game against a veteran, and Flacco has been there, done that, and then to go on the road and, like we mentioned earlier, make that a game going into the second half against a Baltimore team that with one of the better defenses in football. A really impressive year for Stroud and DeMeco Ryans, a rookie quarterback, rookie coach. And Stroud did some things as a rookie that we've never seen before. He also did some things just as a regular player that we haven't seen before. He became just the third player in NFL history to lead the league in pass yards per game and a touchdown interception ratio in the same year. The other quarterbacks to do that, Tom Brady and Joe Montana. So he put himself in some pretty good company this season
He's going to
for
be
a
great.
rookie.
Houston got their guy.
Yeah.
They absolutely got their guy.
Yeah. And they definitely deserve this. The fallout from Watson, the couple years with no quarterback dealing with issues. Nobody wanted to go to those games. To have Stroud, to have DeMeco Ryans, legitimate faces of your franchise, a lot to like there. So I'll go with Stroud as well. Moving on here to defensive side of the ball, rookie of the year, Will Anderson, CJ Stroud's teammate, Jalen Carter, Joey Porter Jr., Kobe Turner, or Devin Witherspoon from Seattle. Who do you got coming away with this one?
I think it's going to be Will Anderson, but I would like to see Witherspoon win that. I mean, I don't know, just watching him play, I've watched a few Seattle games this year. The way he's not afraid to come up and put his helmet on the ball, you're not really finding that with cornerbacks that often, like as you should. But he is a slim linebacker that likes to cover. That's how I kind of feel watching him. But I think it's going to be Will Anderson. He had a great year. I mean, Alabama, just their guys are built different. Obviously, we know that. So I think give it to Anderson this year.
Yeah, I agree. I'll go Will Anderson as well. I was really impressed with both Joey Porter Jr. and Devin Witherspoon, like you mentioned. When a rookie cornerback comes into the league, for guys to have success right away, for guys to really make an impact is really impressive, because corners arguably one of the toughest positions on the field, maybe outside of quarterback. You can make the case. Especially for a rookie as well. You see a lot of times they go through growing pains against some of the better receivers. They don't always match up. Sometimes they're small, not as physical, but I thought both those guys showed a lot of really good things. But I'll go Will Anderson as well. And again, was a big reason why they got to the postseason, had a sack in that wild card game. And I think what was most impressive about Will Anderson, he got so much better as the year went on. You would look at down the stretch, he had 6 of his 7 sacks, or 5 of his 7 sacks came in the final 5 weeks of the season. This was a guy that, as the year went on, got better, got more dominant. The sky's the limit for him. And I think you're going to see him in 2024 take an even bigger step. And at some point in his career, I think it's definitely possible he could certainly be in the conversation of Defensive Player of the Year as he continues to get better. But I'll take him as well, coming home with the Defense Rookie of the Year honor here. One more award here we'll go to before we get to Comeback Player of the Year and MVP. Coach of the Year, Dan Campbell, John Harbaugh, DeMeco Ryans, Kyle Shanahan, Kevin Stefanski. Who do you got?
That's tough. That is very tough. If I was a voter and I was going to write one name on that card, I think it's going to be DeMeco Ryans. I think I'm going to stick with that one. We talked a lot about Houston today already as it is. I wrote a few articles on Houston this year, kind of one of them being like a surprise team that could, have a good year. I think this is when they started out before they started the first game of the season, kind of just watching some Stroud. And midway through the season, I think November or September, I wrote another one on them, just focusing on them and just how well they were playing and a few different things here. Like I said, they were supposed to win 6 games this year, finish dead last in the division. You have a rookie quarterback and a bunch of weapons that, again, a lot of people probably didn't know much about. So I'm going to give it to DeMeco Ryans. I mean, he turned that culture around in Houston, so I think he deserves it.
Yeah, this is a very, very good list. You can make a strong case for any of these coaches. Dan Campbell takes the Lions to the title game. Harbaugh 1 seed with Baltimore. DeMeco Ryans, obviously, you just talked about him. We've talked about the Texans a lot today. Shanahan 1 seed, and Stefanski getting his team to the playoffs despite all the quarterback issues, and then obviously taking Joe Flacco there. So a lot of really good coaches. I'm very torn between Dan Campbell and DeMeco Ryans. I like Dan Campbell a lot. I think the going for it on fourth down was the dumbest thing I've ever seen in the title
Absolutely
game.
stupid.
Yeah, very. So I'll go D'Amico Ryans here. I just think D'Amico Ryans out of this list, he probably is the most unexpected, because I will say this about the
Yeah.
Lions. A lot of us thought, I don't think many of us thought they'd be this good, but a lot of us, I said at the beginning of the year, I think, you did as well. This team could be a dark horse. They could make some noise. They were right there last year, 9-8, almost got in, ended the season on a high note, got better in the offseason. You knew the players believed in them, went out this year and were dominant. Again, I don't think many of us saw them being this good where they'd host 2
Yeah.
playoff games, get to a title
Not
game,
at all.
yeah, definitely. But for D'Amico Ryan's perspective, I mean, this was a team that we expected to win 5-6 games, and to take them, get them to 10 wins, I think is huge. So I'll go D'Amico Ryan's there as well.
And win the division. I mean, 10
Yep.
wins is one thing, but to win the division and host a playoff game against a Browns team which was depleted, but I mean, there was still a very good Browns team. I mean, that same Browns team beat the 49ers who in the Super Bowl. So definitely, I think, like you just said perfectly, just they exceeded expectations, and I think it's only up from here when it comes to Houston.
Yeah. And a Browns team too, who went into that game with experience. And not,
Yeah,
experience is
true.
huge. And not often do you see a rookie quarterback go in, beat a veteran like Flacco, just completely outplay them, dominated. So a lot of credit there goes to D'Amico Ryan. So I'll go him as well here. So now we move to MVP. Josh Allen, Lamar, CMC, Dak, Purdy. 2 of these guys are in the Super Bowl. Obviously, CMC and Purdy. The other 3 find themselves, they'll actually be present for the honors. Who do you got coming away with this one? Of course, the most talked about, biggest award of them all.
Well, you already know my stance on who I think should win it. I'm not going to get much into it, but Dak is definitely more than deserving of winning it. But I think they're going to give it to Lamar, which I don't know. Lamar deserves it. Like, I genuinely love watching Lamar play, but just a little unfair here with the records. I mean, we're talking about. I guess I am going to get into it just a little bit. I'm sorry, just a little bit. But there's 2 games that go a little different for Dallas, which is Philly and Miami, where if they win those 2 games where the defense not much for Philly, but definitely Miami, where the defense kind of crumbles at the end, and Philly game, they do get down to the 2-yard line, things go wrong. If they win 2 of those games, I mean, we might be talking about the number 1 seed Cowboys, and it'll be a whole different thing when it comes to Dak. But him losing those games probably hurt his chances, and obviously the blowout against Buffalo. But the reward is just kind of weird. I mean, you do want to give it to the most valuable player, but I do think Baltimore would have probably been not as good, but similar, because they're such a run heavy team. So they, if you got a good running game, quarterbacks can step into that system with a good running back and be successful. But I mean, if Cooper Rush was the quarterback for the Cowboys, they win 5 games this year.
Yeah.
But it's going to be Lamar, and I'm glad Lamar's going to win it, because I feel like a lot of the slander and disrespect he gets is for absolutely no reason. So if it's obviously not Dak, Lamar.
Yeah, I think you make a great point about Dak. Like, again, I think sometimes the whole most valuable thing gets lost in the mix a little bit. Like, people always want to just see whoever puts up the most numbers.
That's
Legitimately,
exactly
like, you
what it
take,
is.
yeah, like, the most valuable to me is, and I know, like, this football, and I'm not going to stick on baseball for too long, but a couple years ago when it was Shohei and Judge competing for the MVP award, people were saying, oh, Shohei plays both sides of the field, all that stuff. And then people were saying, oh, Judge doesn't. But when you actually look at most valuable, you take away Judge from the Yankees, that team's terrible. We saw it this year. You take away Shohei, they're not a playoff team. With Shohei, they're not a playoff team. So in terms of most valuable, Judge is more valuable than Shohei from that perspective. Maybe I'm biased as a Yankee fan, but at least that season, he was more valuable, because you take him away, they're terrible. You have him, you're a playoff team. Shohei, with him, they're not a playoff team. Without him, they're not a playoff team. So it's like, most valuable, I think, sometimes gets lost in the mix, and that's unfortunate. And I think, like you mentioned, Cooper Rush or Andy Dalton, when they had him, obviously they're not going anywhere. I think Lamar's going to win it. And he's had a very good season. Of course, 1C. We talked about it with Harbaugh just a couple minutes ago, being a Coach of the Year finalist. Be a big night for Baltimore if they both take away awards. But I will say, I think one guy that does deserve more recognition is Christian McCaffrey. I mean, this guy's a monster. 1,459 yards, 14 touchdowns on the ground. What he does as a receiver as well is great. Total, he had 2,023 all-purpose yards, 21 touchdowns on 339 total touches. This guy, like, you take him away from San Francisco, they're nothing, in my opinion. Just because of how much he's got the ball in his hands. He's so dangerous. So I'll go with Christian McCaffrey. I think he deserves a little bit more recognition. He also is, in the Super Bowl. And, I think, obviously, it's quarterback Purdy. I think Purdy at times, I don't want to go down the road with Purdy because, Purdy is Purdy's interesting.
If I'm correct, out of he obviously had a bunch of touches this year. I can remember one fumble from Christian McCaffrey that he lost all year, which was Dallas, the Dallas game. But I don't remember him putting the ball on the ground that much or at all. So I think that's just more impressive for somebody who's rushing as much as he is and catching the ball as well, to not be putting the ball on the ground and putting your team in bad situations, those type of things. He definitely needs more respect for what he brings to that offense. Definitely. Brock Purdy would not be the same without Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, definitely. We saw it. Yeah.
I'm going to say
it. Dare we say Brock Purdy's game manager?
Especially not now. I mean,
no, yeah, we can't.
Might get the black SUVs outside. The bang bang Niner gang if we disrespect Brock Purdy.
Yep, can't do it. Yeah, so I'll go Christian McCaffrey, but I think Lamar's going to win it. And I think that's probably been the case for a while now with Lamar. Very similar to his 2019 campaign where he took home the award as well. So another trophy to Lamar's case, which would obviously be something I think is very impressive. All right, so moving on here to an interesting award. That's Comeback Player of the Year. Joe Flacco, DeMar Hamlin, Baker Mayfield, Matthew Stafford, Tua. I think most people agree it's probably going to be DeMar. Where's your stance on this one? Who do you think will win this? DeMar, assuming probably DeMar Hamlin, but who do you think?
Yeah, I think it has to be. I mean, like we talked about off air, Comeback Player of the Year means you come back from something, something. I don't want to say traumatic. That's not how I want to word it.
Yeah.
With, the DeMar Hamlin thing, but like we said off air, I can understand Tua because he had the concussions last year and that injury history, and then you come back full scratch of health and you lead the Dolphins to a playoff game. And DeMar Hamlin, obviously, everyone knows what kind of happened with that. So I understand why one of those two should be considered, and I think DeMar Hamlin should and will win it. But like you said off air, I mean, Joe Flacco, where did you come back from? You were sitting on the couch. You didn't really come back from much. So it has to be DeMar Hamlin. How you said the MVP reward kind of gets tossed around and blended up with all the different words and the different requirements and those type of things. It has to be DeMar Hamlin. He's the only one that really made a comeback of any sort of type, and I guess Tua.
Yeah, I agree. I'll go DeMar Hamlin as well. I think he'll win it. But yeah, you can't. The Comeback Player of the Year can't be coming back from sucking. You can't just come back from being bad. And no offense to Baker Mayfield, but that's basically why he's on this list. He came back from not being good. You can't. That's not coming back for anything. And we talked about it off air, but there should be a Most Improved Player of the Year award.
Absolutely.
That should be Baker Mayfield. That should be your Joe Flacco's, guys who were bad the previous year or not very good, and then come out and do what they did. Got to the playoffs. Baker won a playoff game, all that stuff. Comeback Player of the Year should only be, coming off of a torn ACL, coming off a torn Achilles, coming off of obviously an incident where he nearly lost his life in DeMar Hamlin against the Bengals. That should be Comeback Player of the Year. Not, I was watching Netflix on the couch. The Browns called me and said, hey, come play quarterback for us. That's not Comeback Player of the Year. So I think there's got to be a Most Improved. I will say, though, one guy that I do think is kind of snubbed is Breece Hall. He deserves more recognition, I think, for Comeback Player of the Year. Coming back from the torn ACL from a running back that early and that good, we thought he was going to get off to a slow start. That was the whole reason for signing Dalvin Cook. and boom, first run was for 20 yards. In that same game, he had a run that went 82 yards. Like, he was a monster this year. 1,500 total yards, both through the air and on the ground. He to come back from that, I think he should be recognition. You can make the case he could be over Flacco or Mayfield. Like, I think he was
Now
snubbed a
that
little
you
bit.
mentioned that, I mean, he did start the year off rough, obviously, with the whole Aaron Rodgers going down the offense, kind of trying to
Yeah.
adjust. But once he started getting going, like later on in the year, and
Yeah.
especially again when how the offense was structured after Aaron Rodgers, where teams are stacking the box and they're like, Brees Hall, you're gonna have to just beat us, and he was doing exactly that. So I think he was snubbed, and he should have gotten maybe over Joe Flacco and Baker Mayfield because he had an insane year. I'm excited to see what he's going to do next year. So I think that might be, it sounds kind of crazy, but that might be a top 5 running back next year we're talking about in Brees Hall. I agree.
No doubt. I think he's got a little bit of Christian McCaffrey in him. Like, and I'm not saying he's better than him. He's still got to prove that, but he's got that ability as a pass catcher and a runner to just dominate. And we saw that this year. I mean,
he reminds me of Le'Veon Bell. Just a little bit.
And he's so, like, when he's running, it doesn't look like he's trying. He's just so free. He's tough to bring down. He's slippery. Got good when he gets to the second level. He's so dominant. This team just needs to get an offensive line behind him. That's the biggest thing. But to go out there and be 6 yards short of 1,000 yards the year after tearing your ACL, and having over 1,500 total yards, he had 591 receiving yards. Like, to do all that, to have 9 total touchdowns this year, which is crazy. I mean, you could count the Jets' total touchdowns this year with your fingers, So, he was a monster. And another thing too with Brees Hall, there's not much help. Like, he didn't have really a number 2. There wasn't much. Dalvin Cook was terrible. Israel Abinaconda had barely played. And didn't do much when he did. And Michael Carter, of course, got cut middle of the season. So, similar to a receiver, Brees Hall was on the field a lot, like, because they had to keep him on the field because there was nobody else they could go to. You couldn't really two running back sets in the backfield. Teams knew the ball was going to Brees Hall a lot. To run behind an offensive line that had 13 different combinations and do what he did is super impressive. I'm excited to see what he could do next year. I think you give him a quarterback, you give him a mediocre offensive line, not the league worst line, he's going to do some really special things, I think. But yeah, the comeback player of the year award's got to be adjusted, I think. But it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing. So Senior Bowl is this week. We could close things up here, quickly discussing the Senior Bowl. What were some of your takeaways? Some of the receivers did a lot of really good things this week. I know offense linemen as well. Talisi Fuaga had a good week, which is a Jets draft target. But a lot of really good receivers that'll probably fall to the middle rounds, along with some first-round talent as well, made some impressions. So what was your takeaways from the Senior Bowl week?
Well, again, we'll go back to what we talked about off air, how you kind of mentioned Keon Coleman for Dallas. I mean, I would personally think Jerry myself. But, a lot of the receivers looked pretty good. I mean, I know we talked about Ricky Pearsall a lot for the Jets and somebody that can be like that slot option, and kind of how we mentioned, we're thinking this guy's like 5'11", 5'10". I mean, we're talking about a 6'1" guy who could play outside and be a nice complement to Garrett Wilson. So Roman Wilson also looked very good this week from what I've kind of seen from a few clips. And, Michigan guys kind of get overlooked with how well they run the ball. They not too much do a lot in the air with their receivers, but a lot of good receivers. It's a deep class, like you said earlier, very deep. So just hopefully there's some teams out there that won't be dumb enough to take a kicker or, I don't know, a guard when there's all these receivers out there, Jerry Jones, where you need a receiver. So, yeah, pretty deep class.
Yeah, definitely. It's an exciting receiver class from the top down. At the top, you've got guys like Rome Odunze, obviously Malik Neighbors, of course, Marvin Harrison, and even, the Troy Franklins, the Keon Colemans that'll probably go more later in the first round. Maybe if a team gets lucky, they get him early in the second, but most likely first. Adonai Mitchell from Texas. There's a lot of really good pieces. And then even to the middle rounds, you mentioned Ricky Pearsall, who I really like a lot. Malachi Corey, too, from Western Kentucky, shown a lot of really good things. Roman Wilson from Michigan, I thought had a really good week. Johnny Wilson's just a monster. 6'7". I think he might be not many times do you see a guy with that type of build, that type of athleticism. You could probably make a good case. He, out of every prospect, he's the most intriguing prospect just in terms of his size, his speed, and his athleticism. And if the Jets, like, the first Wilson to Wilson connection in New York failed miserably with Dak. So hopefully the second Wilson connection, if we do go and get Johnny Wilson or Roman Wilson, would be better. But there's a lot of guys. Even Jamari Thrash, too, from Louisville is another piece. So there is very deep class. And I think you can get possibly some really good number 2 options in the 3rd, 4th round. While the Jets, just from a Jet perspective, while the Jets will probably go out there and get a receiver in free agency to be their 2, Ricky Pearsall, Roman Wilson, Johnny Wilson as your 3, push Lazard back to 4. I think that's a very good supporting cast for Rodgers, 10 times better than last year. So
ship Lazard off. I say
Lazard,
I
would.
Off. Ship him off. I know you probably didn't want to say that. I'm sorry, but
ship
him off. I mean, try to get another 4th or 5th round, complimentary pick. I don't know if he has much value right now, but it'd be better to just go ahead and eat up that money besides let him sit and rot behind these other guys. So ship him off, try to get a little bit of nothing for him. I mean, you never know what those other picks might come out to be. So
yeah.
I
would get rid of him. He's got to stop kicking soccer balls at practice. That's all he does.
I mean,
he tries to catch footballs with his feet. You could tell.
I think Alan Lazard and Michael Gallup would be the perfect 1 and 2 for Zach Wilson in Denver. That's just me. That is just me. I mean, they've been trying to shop their receivers around for the past 3 years. So get Alan Lazard, Michael Gallup in Denver, Zach Wilson,
quarterback.
Sign Phillip Lindsay back. I don't know. Just go all out. You got nothing to lose.
Bring in Dalvin Cook, and
Broncos dream team.
Get CJ Uzama at tight end.
Broncos the dream team.
Gosh, could you imagine Lazard and Gallup in a receiver room together?
They might have to turn to a triple option team in Denver.
That would,
There's
put Sean Payton under center.
that would not work out. That might be the historically lowest scoring offense in NFL history, dating back to the 1800s.
That would be worse.
They're not scoring points.
That would be worse than this year for the Jets.
They're not scoring points. I just don't see it happening.
I just never seen a guy in Lazard drop so many passes. He's so bad. He stinks. But he will definitely, hopefully, be gone at the end of the year or end of next year. Probably. I don't think they'll get rid of him this year because Rodgers is going to want to get a chance to play with him. But I'd ship a lot of this organization out right now. If we could, I'd ship our owner out too. Woody, get out of here. Robert Saleh, Nathaniel Hackett, get Hackett out of there. Hackett's terrible. It's good times to be fans of teams with owners that don't know what they're doing, but it is what it is.
Whether you got 12 wins on the year or you got 6, ownership sucking, that's something we can agree on, regardless of record. And our season lasting a week longer than yours, we're all in the same place. So,
we're all back here just waiting for free agency to start.
Yep, sleeping it away, trying to.
Yep, pretty much. So, any other closing thoughts before we finish things out here?
Who is your Super Bowl pick? Or if you plan on doing a show next week, we can discuss it then. But I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, we can do that next week. Another show. I will say this. I am rooting for the Niners, but I will keep my pick a secret until next week. My pick's probably obvious, but I mean, I'm picking one of the 2 teams. I will say that.
Yeah, I'm
that is my giveaway.
I'm picking the team in red.
Team in red.
So I guess I'll discuss next week who we're going, but definitely the team in red.
Yeah, that's a good one. Coin toss. What do we have? Heads or tails?
Definitely, I'm taking tails.
Tails. Yeah.
Tails,
Probably.
Chiefs to win, and they defer. That's what I'm going with. I don't know who's putting parlays out for coin tosses. I'm starting to hear that's a thing. So take my word for it. Chiefs, Tails, they defer to the second half.
Yeah, I saw somebody bet 100K on the coin toss. I don't know. I never knew somebody could be dumber than Nathaniel Hackett, but there we are.
Jerry Jones.
Jerry Jones.
That is absolute insanity. A waste of $100,000, but not my money.
Yeah, 50-50 chance doesn't make sense. But yeah. Anyway, that'll do it. We'll be back here next week talking about the big game and maybe the coin toss as well. As always, hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.